His smug expression at our termination meeting was telling me that we could hire 3 entry-level engineers with your salary. Nothing personal, simply trying to save money. During my 18 years as lead systems engineer at Smash Housing, I have been known as Daniel James. I am 55 years old. The executives failed to see how much the company relied on me because I had constructed their whole infrastructure from the ground up, planned all of their expansions, and ensured that everything ran well. Eventually, they decided they couldn't afford my services anymore. Just 6 months into his role as Chief Technology Officer, Cornelius Stombank sat across from me. He had an MBA from Cornell, was 42 years old, and sported stylish spectacles. His job description allegedly included laying off the most seasoned employees before he could update the business. While passing a folder across the table, Human Resources Representative Diane gushed about the hefty severance payment. "Thank you. Is that all you have to say?" I asked Cornelius, who appeared somewhat disappointed as I accepted the folder and nodded. Maybe he thought I was going to start an argument or threaten to sue. Make it easy for him to report my tough behavior to the board. "What would you like me to say?" "Most people in your position have questions, concerns," I said without thinking. Diane, who appeared just as baffled by my composure as Cornelius, and I exchanged looks as we said, "Seems pretty straightforward to me." I wasn't calm, and they didn't get it. Completed the task. You're mistaken. "When it comes to the changeover, we could really need your assistance," Cornelius said. "A little instruction on the system's architecture is in order for the newly formed engineering team. Perhaps we could work out a short-term consulting arrangement." I stated, "I'll think about it," even though I knew I wouldn't. Handshakes were exchanged. I dumped everything from my desk without grumbling. It was all packed into one cardboard box, 18 years of labor. I gave a polite nod of farewell to a couple co-workers who averted their eyes in discomfort, perhaps anticipating the same outcome. In the parking garage, my phone started buzzing as I made my way to my truck. My database administrator from 12 years ago, Alan, sent me a text message. "Hi, I'm Vic." There is complete panic among the squad. That was my response. While sipping a drink of bourbon, I sat on my veranda with a view of Lake Ontario and watched the sun set, turning the water a coppery hue. Eleanor, my wife, put her hand on my shoulder. As for my future plans, I simply shrugged. Something will turn up. Cornelius was ignorant and had neglected to find out that I had done more than build their systems. The company's historical reluctance to invest in a dedicated documentation staff meant that I was left to custom code big areas with little to no documentation. The complex network architecture, hidden security layers, and deep redundancies were all understood only by me, and I had no intention of explaining them to anyone. In the beginning, I worked for Smash Housing, which was a real estate management company that had 4 apartment complexes and 12 people when it was known as Skynet Properties. Their whole information technology setup was a pair of desktop PCs, a fax machine, and a dial-up modem. I was recruited by the owner, Herman Bay, when I was still working as a consultant in Syracuse. He informed me that we are growing. "Are you able to construct anything sturdy? We need your help." In the 18 years after its inception, that simple setup had grown into a comprehensive property management system that processed 63 properties in 4 states, including applications, background checks, automatic maintenance requests, and rent collections. As my business expanded, I added to it, upgraded it, and tweaked it until it was just right. Justin, Herman's son, sold the business to a private equity group 5 years ago. The new owners renamed it Smash Housing. Motivated by my achievements, they decided to keep me on. But then things started to shift. Priorities shifted, new management were brought in, and quarterly goals took precedence over long-term stability. My red flags appeared slowly. My suggestion for a documentation group was first shot down. They claimed it was too costly. Next quarter, we'll address the matter. Nobody ever got that quarter. After that, consultants began to arrive. Young men with MBAs who spoke about using cloud technology to revolutionize property administration. They would listen blankly while I described our system's architecture, and then suggest generic alternatives that wouldn't work with our unique setup. I refused to give in, and instead demonstrated the unique proprietary code that made our system tick, arguing that their method would fail. I stopped getting invitations to planning meetings after a while. It was Eleanor who saw it first, not me. Over dinner one night, she said, "They're pushing you out." She said, "You need to prepare." I ignored her criticism. She said, "They need me. No one else understands how the whole system works together." She then went on to say that that might be the key issue. Cornelius was appointed as the new Chief Technology Officer 6 months ago. Straight away, he began discussing standardization and the replacement of outdated systems. He had previously worked for a financial software company. 3 junior engineers, just out of college, were recruited by him. They were following me around and interrogating me regarding the system. Even though I explained everything to them, I could tell they weren't getting the subtleties. Just how were they able to do it? It had taken me a long time to construct those systems, learn their interdependencies, and implement the redundancies that prevented disruptions in the event of an emergency. Cornelius paid a visit to my office last week. "Just a quick meeting tomorrow morning," he casually mentioned. "This is merely a quarterly review. It should have been obvious to me." 2 weeks following my dismissal, I received my first call. The phone rang when I was working on my resume in my home office. Thomas Stombanks. My phone went to voicemail. "Cornelius here, Daniel. There seem to be some problems with the tenant portal. The younger team is attempting to fix it, but they are confused by your code's design. Would you be able to return our call? A brief consultation is all that will be required." I returned to my resume after erasing the message. That day, 3 additional calls arrived, with each voicemail displaying a growing sense of urgency. Everything changed when Alan sent me a text message in the evening. "All day the systems have been down. The processing of maintenance requests is faulty. Cornelius is going crazy. Human Resources Diane contacted the following morning. Dear Daniel, I hope that all is fine with you. I'm phoning to inquire about the possibility of a short-term consulting arrangement to address some existing system problems. The salary would be very generous." My phone rang, and I took it. What a generous person you are. $400 per hour with a 4-hour minimum commitment. I promised to return your call after giving it some thought, and I never did. Eleanor set a cup of coffee on the table and said, "What are you thinking?" As I sat at my kitchen table and stared out at the lake. "I'm worried they're finally figuring out my true value," she said, as the number of calls from Cornelius Diane, and even Justin Bayou, who was still on the board, rated the tenant portal's functionality over the following 3 days. Day 3 brought an email from Lawrence Devlin, Director of Technology at Devlin Systems, a regional competitor to Smash. Devlin Systems managed fewer properties but had been rapidly expanding, and the automatic payment processing had failed, impacting thousands of residents. I chose not to respond to any of these emails. I responded and scheduled a meeting for the next day. That night, while Eleanor and I were making dinner, my doorbell rang. "Daniel, I've heard about your situation at Smash. We've always respected your work from a distance. Would you be open to discussing opportunities with us? We're planning to upgrade our entire property management infrastructure." On my porch stood Cornelius Stombanks, his designer spectacles slightly crooked and his ordinarily spotless suit creased. "Daniel, I'm sorry to have shown up unannounced, but we are facing an emergency. The whole system is down. Nothing is functioning. The team is at a loss as to what the problem is and how to resolve it." I rested my head against the doorframe. "That sounds like a major problem." "It is. We are in dire need of your assistance. The board has given me permission to offer you a substantial consulting fee, $500 per hour, whatever it takes." I considered the cardboard box in my garage, where 18 years of work had been reduced to meager mementos. My thoughts were focused on cost reduction rather than anything personal. I also considered the documentation team. I whispered, "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles, but I have an interview tomorrow. Something will turn up just like I thought." I shut the door behind him, and for the first time since my termination, I felt a wave of clarity rather than satisfaction or vindication. I went back to making dinner. The interview with Lawrence Devlin went more smoothly than anticipated. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Rochester, far from the offices of both companies. Lawrence said, while stirring his coffee, "I've followed your work for years. The integrated property management system that you built at Smash is legendary in our industry." I thanked them and mentioned that it took time. "We are interested in creating something similar, but we don't want to start from square one. We need someone who knows the architecture, the integration points, the security layers, and can make us something better than what's already out there." Lawrence grinned and said, "I'm interested." He then proceeded to offer me the position of Chief Systems Architect, along with full benefits, stock options, and a salary that was 20% higher than what I was making at Smash. It was a generous offer, almost too good to be true. I asked, "Why me?" And Lawrence laughed. He said, "There are younger, cheaper engineers out there. You sound a lot like your previous employer. We went that route. We hired 3 highly intelligent engineers from prestigious universities. They created something shiny and new. But it breaks down whenever we have more than 100 users online at once. We're not looking for cheap, but for reliable. So I took the job the following day. In the meantime, Smash's issues were getting worse." Cornelius called again a week after I started at Devlin. "Daniel, please, this is becoming serious. We have lost access to payment records for the past 3 months. Alan kept me updated through occasional texts. The system had been partially restored, but critical functions were still failing. They had brought in an expensive consulting firm that specialized in legacy system recovery. I was going to disregard the tenants' complaints about erroneous charges. But then I remembered that the consulting team needs your input on the database structure. Cornelius, I'm now employed elsewhere under an exclusive contract, so I'm afraid I can't be of any help to you. We'll pay you twice as much for just 2 days of your time. Cornelius, I'm not enjoying it. But you made a business decision. You decided my experience wasn't worth the cost. Now you're discovering what that actually means. So, it's not about the money. Then what is it about revenge? Are you enjoying watching us struggle? I paused, thinking carefully about my answer. Thanks for the offer, but I'm committed to Devlin Systems. The board wants to talk about bringing you back with full salary and a signing bonus. I felt a brief surge of satisfaction, but it quickly faded. Going back wouldn't solve anything. The executives who thought I was expendable would be waiting for the next chance to cut costs. Cornelius's tone became more serious as he warned of potential legal ramifications should it be found that I had purposefully made our systems more difficult to maintain. He brought up issues with intellectual property and non-compete clauses, which was the threat I had anticipated. The situation was identical to when the company flat out rejected my requests for a documentation team, so I responded in kind. According to my job contract, Smash owns every line of code. I've taken nothing with me but my experience, but feel free to have your lawyers call mine. I hung up the phone, slightly trembling from fury rather than fear, which I had suppressed until now. I was finally insulted when they said I had sabotaged them. Here at Devlin, I was able to start over, constructing systems correctly from the bottom up with thorough documentation, engineering team training programs, and redundancies to avoid disasters like the one that had recently occurred. I had decided I wouldn't aid them, but I also wouldn't turn around. The hard method was the only way to learn some things. My new workplace at Devlin Systems had an unannounced guest a month after I started working there. With a laptop bag in hand, Alan, who had previously worked as my database administrator, stood uncomfortably in the doorway. "What time is it for lunch?" he inquired. According to Alan, I was informed about the mayhem at Smash, over sandwiches at a nearby deli. "It's worse than you think," he whispered above the din of midday diners. I wasn't shocked that they might have to start over because the backup system had several redundancies and security protocols that had to be strictly adhered to. Now they can't access data from the past 3 years because the backup systems have been corrupted. Alan went on to say, "What's more, I stumbled upon something while attempting to elucidate the payment processing system to the consultants. Cornelius had been plotting your termination for months, meeting with the board to persuade them that your custom infrastructure was too costly to maintain. Skipping even one step would render the entire process ineffective in protecting tenant data from unauthorized access. Alan produced his laptop and showed me a stack of emails he had found in the system archives. In them, Cornelius discussed the legacy staff reduction plan with the board and singled me out as the first target. Cornelius informed them that they could hire cheaper engineers to replace you and switch to off-the-shelf solutions in 6 months, according to Alan. He estimated yearly savings of more than $1 million. As I perused the emails, an odd distancing sensation washed over me. One particular line from Cornelius stuck out. James's custom systems are overly complicated. He has rendered himself indispensable through design, not necessity. What's more, Alan mentioned that the private equity firm that owns Smash is planning to sell. It had all made sense now, the year of preparation, the hiring of Cornelius, with the express purpose of lowering expenses and making the company appear more profitable in anticipation of the sale. The drive for standardization, the opposition to adequate documentation, and the abrupt emphasis on cutting costs among senior staff all had nothing to do with improving the company. It was all about making it look good enough to sell quickly. I asked Alan why he was showing me this, and he shut his laptop. Because I quit yesterday, and I'm not the only one. Half of the IT department is left. The consultants are estimating at least 6 months to restore full functionality, maybe longer. He paused, and Smash's biggest client, Westbrook Properties, has lost faith in the management system, leaving them considering jumping ship. What are you going to do now? I asked myself, considering that Westbrook was responsible for around 30% of Smash's revenue, and that their departure would have a catastrophic effect given the impending sale. I inquired, and Alan smiled and said, "Really? I was hoping Devlin might be hiring database administrators." Later that afternoon, I discussed the possibility of bringing Alan on board with Lawrence, and he was quick to agree. There was a critical situation. Westbrook was threatening to terminate their contract. The board was questioning my decisions, and we were assembling a team of people who knew how to build long-lasting systems. That evening, I got another call from Cornelius, but this time his voice lacked authority. "Daniel, please." There was a brief hush as he spoke up about how you knew this would happen, how you knew exactly what would break and when. "No, Cornelius. It wasn't about money, but about respecting experience and doing things right the first time. We need your help. I'm sorry, Graham, but I can't help you." "Name your price." "Anything." At the end of the call, I felt neither triumph nor regret, just the quiet certainty that some lessons can only be learned through failure. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Lawrence called me into his office 2 months into my role at Devlin Systems. I tried to share this information many times. He announced, "I just got off the phone with Jeffrey Westbrook, naming Westbrook Properties CEO. They're officially terminating their contract with Smash next month." Westbrook Properties oversaw 10,000 units in the Northeast. Devlin's present activities would be more than doubled if they were to take over their portfolio. I confess that we aren't prepared for a project of that magnitude. The new system is making progress, but it's still in its early stages. Lawrence leaned in and asked, "What would it take to be ready if we had to?" My calculations came up with 3 additional senior engineers, dedicated server infrastructure, and 8 weeks of development time. Even then, it would be tight. Jeffrey is in a state of desperate need. This was the moment, the turning point. If Devlin had taken on Westbrook and won, it would have established us as a formidable competitor in the industry. If we lost, it could have sunk both of our companies. Smash's shortcomings are impacting their standing with tenants. He's prepared to grant us 12 weeks and pay for the infrastructure expansion. I gave myself the night off to think about the architecture and came up with a hybrid approach that would allow us to onboard Westbrook's properties in stages with minimal disruption. I drew system diagrams, mapped data migration pathways, and considered scaling challenges. In the morning, I had a plan that was ambitious but achievable. I showed it to Lawrence, and he looked it over thoroughly. "This is solid," he said at last. "But I notice you've included a substantial documentation phase that adds 3 weeks to the timeline." I said, "It's non-negotiable." "That's the problem. Documentation is our strength, and we train the team on every component from the start. There are no weak spots. I designed a modular architecture that could scale with Westbrook's needs. And Alan built a database migration tool that could translate Smash's data structure into our new system. In the following weeks, we hired 5 more engineers, 2 of whom had recently left Smash." Lawrence nodded and said, "I'll take your word for it." We moved forward with great fervor. Justin Bayou, who was still a member of Smash's board and the son of the former owner, emailed me halfway through the project and said, "Daniel, I want to apologize for how things ended. The board was misled about the implications of letting you go. Cornelius has been removed as CTO. We're struggling to recover, and Westbrook's departure will hit us hard." Cornelius's removal added insult to injury. We were prepared for a staged rollout 10 weeks into our 12-week timeline. The smallest region of Westbrook, which consisted of 2,000 units in western New York, would migrate first. If everything went well, the other regions would follow. Lawrence summoned me back into his office the day before the migration for another meeting. "Are you the system architect?" said a familiar person who turned out to be none other than Jeffrey Westbrook. "I hope everything is going well." Jeffrey grinned as he stood to shake my hand. "Lawrence has spilled the beans about you. So I'm hearing that you've created us something that can handle expansion without bursting at the seams. We intend to do that. Also, I heard that you were an employee at Smash." Unsure of his intended trajectory, I simply nodded. "Trouble is brewing for them, you know. The private equity group is attempting to sell, but their system is still not fully functional, and Westbrook has left. They aren't getting many bites from potential customers." For a moment, he stood still, with the exception of one. "Oh, really? Who is that?" Asking nevertheless, I had a feeling I knew the answer. Lawrence mentioned Devlin Systems. "We're thinking about putting in a bid that was far lower than their value 6 months ago." While thinking about what it all meant, I peered between them. According to Jeffrey, we would like an individual with knowledge of both firms to spearhead the merger in such a scenario. Someone that could move everything over to your new architecture while rescuing valuable assets from Smash's infrastructure. I thought you were inquiring about my willingness to work on it. I made it clear. In agreement, Lawrence gave a nod. "If the purchase goes through and if it suits your needs." The irony was on my mind. Everything I had worked so hard to build, the system, the employees, and the company that had dumped me, may be returning to me. In the end, I decided that I would be willing to do it. But there is a catch. This is something we excel at. Comprehensive instructions, thorough education, no shortcuts. I concur. Lawrence assured everyone, "We've learned that lesson." He returned to his office without seeking vengeance or retribution, content with the knowledge that quality labor will bear fruit in the end. About 6 months after I left, I found myself in the lobby of the building that had once been RIA Housing's headquarters. The sign read, "Dellin Integrated Property Management." The acquisition had only cost a quarter of what the company had been worth before I left. Lawrence and I made our way through the office, saying hello to the Smash employees who would be staying on during the transition. A few of them looked away, uncomfortable. A few, including those who had worked closely with me throughout the years, nodded quietly in understanding. Cornelius and the majority of the executive team that had authorized my termination had left. Justin Bayou remained on as a consultant, assisting with the transition for legacy clients. I halted as we approached the server room, my former domain. Beheld, through the glass, the hardware I had specified, the blinking lights of the systems I had created. Would you like to enter? Lawrence wanted to know if it was necessary, but I told him no because we were already planning to move everything to the new infrastructure. The rest of Smash's employees were in the main conference room for the announcement, and Lawrence introduced me as the Chief Integration Officer in charge of the technical transfer. Many of you already know Daniel, he added. He built the original systems that ran this company for nearly 2 decades. Looking out at the faces, some familiar, some new, I felt no triumph, no impulse to scream, "I told you so." Now he'll be steering us through the merging of both firms' technologies into something better than either had before. I emphasized that no one would be left behind due to cost-cutting measures, and I spoke briefly about the transition plan, timeline, and available support. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. 1 year after the acquisition, Devlin Integrated Property Management became the largest property management company in the Northeast. On a brisk fall morning, I made my way to Lawrence's office for our last meeting. The properties had all migrated to the new system I had designed, which was fully documented, adequately staffed, and running smoothly. The leaves along Lake Ontario had changed to brilliant shades of red and gold, providing a fitting backdrop for our parting ways. The board approved your proposal, Lawrence informed me as soon as I took a seat. Next quarter, the technical education section will be launched. You will be granted complete freedom to choose course content and faculty. After the integration was finished, this was my condition for staying. The establishment of a department whose sole purpose is to educate aspiring systems engineers and architects, not only in the fundamentals of computer science, but also in the art of creating long-lasting structures, rather than a promotion or a raise in salary. Much obliged. What I stated means a great deal. Oh no, Lawrence responded. What you have created here is quite impressive. Not merely the technology itself, but also its associated culture, documentation, information exchange, and prioritization of quality over expediency. The integration office was emptied by me later that day. This move to my new role was well planned, unlike my sudden departure from Smash. When I was finishing up my belongings, Justin Bowman came pounding on the door. "Do you have a moment?" he inquired. We made our way to the building's little courtyard. His father had inquired about you, he explained. He's retired in Florida now, but he still follows company news. He was glad to hear you were back in a manner of speaking. "How is Herman?" I interrogated. "Very well. Fishing a lot." Justin stopped. He was very clear that firing you would be the worst decision the corporation could make. He was correct, it seems. Feeling lost for words, I simply nodded. Everything here taught me something. Along the lake shore on my drive home, Justin reflected on the importance of value, of doing things well the first time, of building long-lasting systems, and of the individuals who put in the time and effort to ensure their success. You know what? Sometimes the best way to deal with being undervalued is to just prove your worth elsewhere and let the results speak for themselves. Instead of seeking revenge, I just moved forward, building something better, something that would outlast any individual decision or short-term thinking.